Okay, I think in the interest of time, let's kick off. People will join as they will. Welcome all to an event today around the future of e-commerce. We've got an absolutely fabulous panel, which I'm sure you agree with. This event is being run by Aurora Digital with our partners, TLA, Tech London Advocates and Tech UK. And indeed, the moderator for the event today is Eugene, who runs TLA Retail Tech. So thank you, Eugene, for being the moderator today. As a background, Aurora Digital, just as a one-liner, we showcase, we support great tech. That's kind of why we exist, and that's why we run events like this, to showcase events, showcase technology with partners like TLA and Tech UK, who are obviously in the tech space as well. Today's session will hopefully provide you with some wonderful insights into the future of e-commerce, with some lovely case studies or stories of real life examples as well. Would love to hear your feedback after the event as well. So please do provide that to us. It helps us to make sure that we're hitting the right tone with these types of events as well. So really hope you enjoy the event today. I'm going to hand over to Eugene with that, and hope you enjoy the event.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to the event today as well. We've got quite a range of topics and panelists, so it'll be really interesting to hear a diverse range of perspectives. So just a quick bit about myself. Eugene Fisher. I'm a retail strategy consultant, and I specialize in building new product, services, and ventures, and also building innovation capabilities. I lead the Tech London Advocates Retail Tech Group, and we focus on championing startups that are doing interesting and innovative things in the space of retail, as well as retailers who are doing innovative projects as well. The format that we have for the event today, it's kind of breaking it up into 3 distinct sections. And each section will focus on specific discussion points. So we'll start about adapting to a post-COVID world, and we'll have a few speakers talk about things in those sections, and we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So as I mentioned, lots of great speakers from KPMG, the British Retail Consortium, Kingfisher, Incref, N Brown, and Jules, and I'll let each one of them introduce themselves as they speak. And with that, we'll start things off with the first section of the conversation, which is adapting to in post-COVID world with e-com. And I'd like to invite Paul Martin, the global retail lead and the UK head of retail at KPMG, to start us off by sharing some of his perspectives on the evolution of retail, from retail to consumer commerce.
Great. Well, look, good morning, and thank you, Eugene, for that kind introduction, and to Sandeep and the team for having me today. Eugene, as you highlighted, I lead KPMG's global retail practice. I'm not an accountant by background. I am a retailer by background, and at KPMG, I make sure that we match all of our great service propositions with our in-depth industry expertise. And I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes taking a step back and looking at the market context. Eugene just mentioned the title, Transitioning from Retail to Consumer Commerce. And in that context, I'm going to start with a somewhat provocative statement. And I do believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, the word retail will become obsolete. But let me explain in a couple of minutes what I mean with that. And I'm going to structure my overview into 3 key segments. I'm going to start off by talking about why I think the market is changing. Then I will focus on what the market is changing towards, and then how you can transition from today to tomorrow. I appreciate there's a lot to cover in 15 minutes. So some of the points we will not be able to go into the utmost detail. But in that context, I have quite recently written a paper called The Future of Retail, Transitioning to Consumer Commerce. If you would like to have a copy of that report, please visit kpmg.com, link in with me, and we can make sure we send you that publication. It is fair to say that retail over the last 12 months has really faced some pretty significant challenges. On the one side, for various retailers, it has been really a troublesome time due to a very significant decline in demand. For other organizations, they have seen a very significant uplift in demand. And if you look back to 2020, many commentators highlighted that it was the worst year on the British high street. Slightly to the contrary of that, I do need to say, and many of you know, KPMG partners with the British Retail Consortium to collect the weekly retail sales data. We play this back to the market on a monthly basis. So we're able to see on a very accurate basis how the industry has performed. And if I look back to last year, and I look at the entirety of the market, we believe that the overall UK retail economy grew by 0.5% last year. But, and this is the big but, I have never seen the industry as polarized as before. The non-essential categories, specifically looking at menswear, women's wear, footwear, or the beauty category, had a very challenging time. And in these cases, we saw double-digit declines. Of course, online over the course of the last 12 months has accelerated significantly and picked up some of those lost store sales. But overall, the non-essential categories, and not just in the UK, in many other markets around the world, had a very challenging time. But if I flip the coin and I look at the essential categories, specifically grocery or categories related to the home, look at DIY, home appliances, garden as examples in that context, they had a very significant uplift in sales. If you think about the fact we were not able, in many cases, to travel or to spend on leisure and hospitality, a very significant proportion of that expenditure migrated into the retail economy. And if I look at 2021, and if I look specifically at the UK, we are forecasting the overall market will grow by 3.2% in 2021. It will be a game of two halves. The first part of the year, we will see a very similar growth pattern as experienced last year, with those essential categories benefiting most significantly. But as in the UK, many of you will know, as of 2 weeks ago, we have seen stores start to reopen. We're still waiting for leisure and hospitality open their inside premises. And in that context, we will see sales starting to shift away from those essential categories into non-essential categories. And our detailed category forecast, and again, if you would like some of this data, please contact me offline. Our detailed category forecast shows us that those categories that experienced the worst decline in 2020 will see, from a percentage perspective, some of the biggest uplifts in 2021, although it will take until 2022 in many cases until they have regained their sales levels from a pre-COVID perspective. If I then look at what does this retail routine, what should they do? I would highlight 4 key themes that should be at the center of everything you are thinking about. The first theme is around business models and partnerships. But before I dive into that, it is important to say these 4 themes are not new themes. We've been talking about these themes probably for the last 10 to 15 years. COVID has accelerated the pace of change and the urgency to address these topics. Business models and partnerships is the first key theme in this context. And it is fair to say the retail business model up until 10 years ago probably hadn't changed for 2,000 years. The value chain of sourcing great product, shipping product, and selling product in a physical location had been the same for a long, long time. And if you were good at it, you would source more product and you would open new physical locations. Of course, the route to market has become more disrupted. E-commerce being one of, if not the most significant disruptor. Pre-COVID in the UK, a penetration rate of approximately 20%. Today, that penetration rate stands at close to 30%. In many categories, that penetration rate is significantly higher. Historically, food that had a 6% penetration rate was ratio was so much lower. Food has now grown to 17% penetration, which represents a really, really significant game changer in this context. And many commentators have highlighted the online acceleration has been 10 years of growth within 12 months. But if I look at markets like South Korea or China, we can see further route to market fragmentation. If you think of social commerce or voice commerce that are really still in their infancy in many Western countries, have already got a much higher adoption rate in some of these countries in Asia. But we also know retail is a lower margin sector, and transitioning from today to tomorrow is going to be complicated. There'll be a lack of capital, a lack of capabilities to undertake this necessary transition. Therefore, partnerships are going to be really key from a front and from a back office perspective. And in some cases, even considering of, in inverted commas, dancing with the devil, organizations that would have been perceived as competitors is going to be more important. And that links me to the second key trend, cost of doing business. Over the last 10 years, retail profitability around the globe has declined by 50%. In a market like the US or the UK, that decline has been even more extreme. I appreciate this is a median number, and in some categories and some businesses have done significantly better. Others, of course, significantly worse, as we have seen over the recent years, a number of household names that have sadly departed. But in the essential categories, even those retailers that have seen a significant uplift in sales over recent weeks and months, you would have seen uplift in sales does not mean the same around uplift in profitability. Cost of doing business has increased significantly, and businesses are going to have to focus on that whilst changing their business model. I would argue in essential retail, 10 to 20% of costs will need to be taken out over the next 12 to 20 months. And in non-essential retail, 30 to 50% of the current cost base. This is not a tinkering around the edges. This is a very significant change that needs to be undertaken. And it will happen across 4 key areas. Range and assortment in the physical space is going to have to be addressed to really enhance your working capital positions, to optimize your supply chain efficiency and your in-store operations. Retail real estate, we have 30% too much retail real estate in the UK, and the rental business model, the way we had set it up in the past, does not work anymore. That, by the way, does not mean we do not need stores. We absolutely do need stores in the future. We need to be much more scientific, though, where we need stores and how many stores we need and what the role of those stores is going to be. I would argue they have to be the bridge between physical and the digital world. The third area around cost is always very emotional and is connected to the workforce. But we really have to ask the question, where does the human being add the most value in the retail value chain? The BRC highlighted a couple of years ago that sadly by 2030, we could see 1 million job losses out of 3.5 million jobs in the UK retail sector. Sadly, that may happen earlier as we are pivoting the business models, and we are seeing, yes, more requirements in supply chain and logistics and digital capabilities, but we are seeing more store closures. And that brings me to the fourth area of cost of doing business, which is the need to pivot away the capital investment profile from store openings and store refurbishments towards technology and supply chain investments. Again, I mentioned we need stores, but we cannot spend 90% of our capital investment budgets on the store side whilst we are increasingly competing against data and technology businesses. The third key why to highlight is purpose and reputation. This is here to stay. This is really critical. You have to showcase who you are and why you exist as a business. And if you don't, the consumer will vote with their feet. And this is only going to grow in importance. And that leads me to the fourth key why, the customer. In retail, for decades, it was about great products and great locations. Guess what? You still need both, but you need to know who she and he is you're interacting with. Many of your digital competitors are doing that. So that leads me to, well, what does the landscape, what will it look like in the future? And this is where I highlighted, I believe the word retail will become obsolete and we will move to what I call consumer commerce. Why do I use this term? Increasingly, organizations that sell products and services to the consumer will not need to have a legacy in the physical space. They may be data, they may be technology, they may be supply chain businesses. Again, they will in many cases have stores. And if you look to China and you look at the top 10 physical retailers in China, 7 of those top 10 are either owned or have a JV with one of the large technology platforms in China. But I believe there will be 7 winning types of retail businesses. Sorry, I should correct myself. 7 types of consumer commerce businesses in the future. And if you imagine a triangle and you think of the top of the triangle, we will have platform businesses. We know many of these household names that are increasingly merchandising from cradle to grave, either via direct to consumer or marketplace propositions. They will be one business model at the top of the triangle. And joining them in this space are increasingly multinational retailers that are transforming to become a platform business. We have a good example of a large apparel retailer in the UK that is doing that, but various other global retailers that are making this transition. They have increasingly learned that just selling physical products in the physical space is not going to be enough in the future. They need to monetize their supply chain, their technology, their marketing capabilities alongside selling products. Or you go to the left of this triangle. This will be the comfort zone of many of today's retailers, the true omni-channel players, but they will have to be customer-centric and channel agnostic, and they will have to be brutally looking at their costs to be able to afford this transformation. And many of these players, and I call them the national heroes, a lot of today's high street brands, will go and fall into this part of the triangle. But increasingly, they will be challenged by the brands that will be going direct to consumer and have learned either by using platform as a service providers as their go-to market channel or doing it directly, that they don't need the box as the distribution channel. And then we will also see many of the value players, the discounters, also play in this space. Yes, they have a lack of an online capability there, but in that context, they will also, and they have a cheaper operating model, they are leaner and have a longer runway to operate. Or you look at the right of the triangle, and this is where you have the category specialists that are brilliant at what they do. They know their customers, they know their product, and they can afford a higher price point. They are often less than 5% market share, and the independents and the mutuals that also play on the right side of the triangle. These are the 7 types of businesses that I believe will win in the future. All other businesses that do not decide to be either 1 or 2 of these business models will struggle to survive. And in that context, sadly, I do believe we will see a whole host of further casualties once the various government support mechanisms in the UK and around the world run out, that will sadly really put various other organisations into distress. So I've spoken a lot about the why, the what, the how, and I've given you a very initial overview on the how, but I think organizations need to really define what they want to be going forward of those business models I've described. And when you define, you need to decide, do I want to buy, do I want to build, or do I want to partner? Once I've made that decision, and in some cases you will choose to do multiple of these options, you then need to design, you need to pilot, and you need to implement. Much more detail in the Future of Retail document I referenced, but thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back to Eugene.
Thanks so much, Paul. That was really interesting, and I'll look forward to seeing the document as well. I really love that you kind of highlighted one of my focus areas, which is the shift to platform businesses. And that's absolutely something that I've been working with retailers, both in the UK as well as in the US, but how they can, shift how they look at their core capabilities, especially some back office capabilities, and consider how they could actually apply the platform business model to their existing business model, which I think is really interesting. And I also really liked how you talked about, the fact that retail isn't dying. The high street isn't dying. It's just shifting. And what's fascinating is that, in the retail, you mentioned last year, there was net growth, but, over the past 5 years, I think retail has outperformed the overall UK economy, right? Not by a lot, but at least by a little. And so I think it shows that, retail isn't dying. It's just changing. And, similar to the model overall, what retail looks like on the high street is also changing as well. And that's actually an interesting transition to Mark Ladham from Kingfisher, who will be discussing a little bit about how retail stores, physical stores, can start transitioning to act as mini warehouses, mini DCs, which is definitely something that we saw increase in popularity over the COVID crisis. And so, Mark, I'd like to welcome you on to share a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much. Very, very difficult person to follow there. My goodness. I'm busy, by the way, amending some of the things I was going to say after his talk. So well done. A great opening speech, I have to say. It really engaged me. So a little bit about me. As you can see from my lack of a hairline, I've been in the retail business. I think it's a typical attribute of most retailers. I've been in the retail business far too long, more than 35 years, in fact. I'm at the tail end of my career, I'd like to think. Although, as every retailer knows, you pretty much die in this game. So I have no intent of stopping anytime soon. And I'll start by saying I am a retailer. I'm not a tech guy. But by goodness, over my 30 plus years, have I seen the significant rise of tech. And frankly, for me as a retailer, the visibility of data to make more decisions. I'll start off by saying something that is maybe highly irrelevant, but I do remember taking the earlier presentation when we used to decide on where stores went in a country, not just the UK, but anywhere, by walking around on dusty streets and saying, that's not a bad corner. There seems to be a fair amount of people walking up and down here, or there's a car park over there. And they all come out of that entrance. So let's have a store here. And that was almost as good as it got. But now things are changing. And I think for me, the most significant thing is, our population, especially in the UK, has become more and more and more over my 30 years condensed. And when it becomes so dense, so you need to think, what do you really need that offer to be? And, I'm a high street guy in my blood. I'll fight for the high street if it has to be. But, when I look at, and I'll share some numbers with you, but when I look at population density, and having lived half of my working career outside of the UK, and in fact, outside of Europe, some of these numbers, and mentioned about China earlier, are quite astonishing. So, we look at the UK market, and overall, we've got a density of just shy of, I think, and don't quote me on these numbers, most of them are Deloitte's, by the way, so I do apologize, but not using KPMG data. Please forgive me. But about 300 people per square kilometre, okay, in the UK. As soon as I look at England only, it becomes 450. And as soon as I look at London, it becomes somewhere per kilometre around 10 to 12,000 per kilometre. And therefore, you've got in the UK quite a microcosm, because how you serve customers in Wales and Scotland is a different scenario to how you should really, from a real retailer cut and thrust, serve them in London. London's really expensive to rent per foot. So what is the plan in London versus Scotland? Because it sure as hell isn't a one size fits all, even in the UK. And therefore, exactly as we talked about earlier, you've got to have an armory of tools to be able to deliver a UK proposition. It's not just stores on the high street. It's not just big boxes out of town. It's not, in my opinion, just e-commerce. And it's not where single warehouses sitting in Stoke-on-Trent, hopefully feeding stock out to customers or indeed delivery companies. It's got to be a combination of all of those, would be my view of the future. I just want to put it into context. I work for a European business, and as I say, I'm a global retailer. But you look at that 12,000 a kilometre in London, or the 400 a kilometre in the UK, and we really aren't just a developed market, but we're so dense, because I compare that 400 in the UK or in England to 120 in France. And in fact, you know, I'll give you an example, and Sandeep, and everybody knows this. India, where I had the pleasure of working and really learning and cutting, burning far too many fingers than I had. But India, 400 across the whole country, huge country, 400 a square metre. And you think of such a populous country as India, well, England's higher. England, not by much, 10, 15%, but population density is higher in the UK than it is in India. So one size doesn't fit all as an international retailer. It absolutely has to be tailored. And I think even looking totally at the UK, which I hate to do, I put my hand up as somebody who voted against Brexit. So I am a European, definitely. Even in the UK, we have to have a model that is flexible to service our customers the way they want to be serviced. The one thing that does bind them all, without doubt, is the fact of the use of online search. There is no question, whether you're in the food business, whether you're in my current industry of the home business, or indeed in the fashion business, online search is where you win. And there's no question that if you don't get that right, if you haven't got the right sort of presence, and I just don't mean a GoDaddy website, I mean real presence with real content and real interaction and real services and real digital ideas that you can then maybe utilize when you go into a store as well, my goodness, you're going to have a tough time in the next few years. And, you know, that's somebody with not many fingers left, having burnt most of them off. My goodness, you'll burn your hands off if you don't get that right. So digital presence and winning on search, not just paid, is absolutely fundamental to the survival of a retailer in the future. And I saw that in India. I saw that in developing markets in the Middle East. The penetration of mobile search in those markets way exceeds the UK even. So we talk about them as developing, they are way ahead of us. And China even more so. I think China, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but you know, I think the numbers in terms of online search now way exceed, and digital mobile use for searching online is in the 70, 80%. To actually trade and buy things online, way up there. But to put it into context, in the UK, the numbers, and I do apologise, Paul, again, from Deloitte, but the numbers are, you know who we work with, don't you? It's obvious. The numbers from Deloitte would suggest, and Google backs this up, that overall as an average, somewhere between last year, 70 to 80% of all retail business started its life with an online search. Online search, whether it be buying online or the majority of cases, as Paul mentioned, buying in store or another route, absolutely online is the starting place. And in the UK, we just have to get that right. And, we've all been on more sites than we can mention just to survive and take away the tedium as customers and as retailers over the last 12 months. We haven't got anywhere else to go. And my goodness, there are some shockingly bad sites out there. And by the way, I'll put my hands up, we're not great either. Whether it be load speed, whether it be availability of product, whether it be terrible images, whether it be the important bit as a retailer. So, okay, you've got me engaged. You've shown me great content. You've shown me an interactive 360 video. But then if I actually see that there's no stores in my area and my next home delivery slot is 3 weeks away, you've lost me. And therefore, that combination, as Paul mentioned at the beginning, is just so critical in terms of that search online and winning, and then following up while you've still got them on your site, following them up with options. And I'll use a really good example. I'm very, very lucky to have a home in France, and the French retailers, because of that scarcity of people, 120, one of the lowest in Europe per square kilometre, Paris aside, obviously, they have to have those options. Otherwise, they just don't get traffic. So the technology to support those options surfacing to wherever that customer may be is so important. And Boot is a really good example. If anybody goes onto their website, furniture retailer, so admittedly my sector, but many are the same, there's never a question of it's only available on one route. It's in your local store, which may be a good hour's drive from you in France, if you're in the country like me. It's maybe not in your local store, but it's in a store an hour and a half drive, and they'll service it even. Do you want to click and collect there one day in the future? Do you want a home delivery in a week and a half's time? Or actually, do you want us to do a next day delivery, which you will pay for, to your store in 3 days' time? And it's very common now to see 4 or 5 options for an online or omni-channel retailer being presented. It's not an either or it's not a take it or leave it, which so many UK retailers are still playing with and struggling with, I would suggest. And that really drives those penetration levels that Paul mentioned. Again, I'm sorry now, Paul, to keep referring to your deck, but it was so strong. And food being the classic example, one of the strongest players in France is the food segment in e-commerce. Not for home delivery. They don't want to touch home delivery. You can imagine with the people spread so far away, it would kill them with their margins. But by Christ, their click and collect proposition, which Sainsbury's is saying is, oh, look at our clicking. They've been doing that since the year 2000. The technology to click and collect frozen food in France is going to blow you away. There's no one in the UK doing that at the moment. And as a result, 25% penetration of e-commerce for a food retailer in France is just about okay. And Paul's absolutely right. I think it's 15-17% in the UK, and we think we're doing, we're really shaking it up. Well, people have been doing that in France for 10-15 years. So we've got some wake up calls. Clothing, is it going to go 50% online? I think overall, yes. But again, that balance between that store experience, the service, and indeed the click and collect next day to your local store, which of course is a much more profitable proposition than delivering it to home. Those options that we all have to play with are just so important. So what I'm saying is there's no single path for e-commerce optimization, and certainly in our business there is no single path. We want to deliver, dependent on where you are, at least one, if not two, if not three routes to get you that product. Exactly as Paul said, I don't want to have 35,000 SKUs in a big box sitting across 300 sites, or in the case of Screwfix, 650 sites across the UK. We can't afford that. So we have to have the data to show, and it's geographic, it's geo data, where customer demand is, what the demand is for. Is it trade focused? Is it DIY focused in my case? And the store ranging now has to be much more precision led than it was of the past. Of, you know, my old M&S days, we had a top 50 store range, we had a top 100 store range, and whether that store was in Scotland or indeed on the south coast, it was irrelevant. You know, the tailoring of that range in store versus the click and collect next day option, and these are the ones we want to do because they're the most profitable for us. And then extend on to home delivery from us, home delivery from extended range vendors, and so on and so forth. And the marketplace, Paul, again, you're absolutely spot on. If you're not into that in your 3-year plan, maybe we should all think better about it, because those collaborations with other retailers, and I know Jules is with M&S, so what great example, you know, really important. And, you know, thank God I still have shares of my pension in M&S. So thank very much, Lynn, for keeping that secure for another couple of years, please. The maturity, I think, is coming. You know, India, we talk about their penetration of digital, and I touched on it earlier. You know, more than 60% of urban population now are buying online in the urban centres in the UK. The UK as a total average isn't even half that, about 30%. So we've still got a way to go in terms of e-commerce. But that's not a bad thing, because if we can get that combination of feeding the right stock to the right customers in the right geolocations and using our store base, maybe fewer, but our store base to get them to pick up from that store, and then using our in-store environment in those fewer locations to inspire and to build that database of customers who buy and return, it's a win. And it's our future blood, would be my belief. So I guess what's holding us back really from running into that, we've had huge demand, we've had, you know, huge spending in many retailers, including mine, on infrastructure. You know, warehouses are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But funny enough, is that the right way? Maybe not. Maybe the right way is really understanding our existing infrastructure, and again, Paul touched on it, and really maximizing not necessarily dark stores, but gearing up our store layouts so that click and collect is a great experience, albeit shoved at the back of the store if the store's bigger. And we've got to get ready to give that true omni-channel experience. If we can do it, and then we can give the options of paying for customers to deliver to home, etc., it's a win. That's it from me. Anybody wants to have a chat with me about it, you can feel in my hands. I do apologize, I use my hands a lot. I'm a very expression and passionate retailer. I'd love chatting about it. It's my lifeblood. I haven't got any, don't try and talk to me about anything else. I'm as boring as hell. But hopefully I'd love to have a chat to anyone who wants to pick up afterwards. Thank you very much. Eugene, back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. That was really interesting. And I love how you started out by talking about the importance of search, because I think there's been, you know, a bit of, you know, scuttlebutt and discussion in the digital optimization space about the relative importance of SEO, and is SEO dying? And I think very much it is absolutely not.
Absolutely.
So I'm really glad that you emphasized. So we're going to briefly, in just a moment, we're going to move on to the our second section, which will be discussing the impact of Brexit on retail. But before we move on, we're going to post a quick survey in the chat window for everyone to answer a question on. And I'd also like to ask one quick question before we move on to Brexit to Anshuman. You know, I think both Mark both Mark and Paul talked a little bit about the importance of inventory and inventory efficiency. And so, Anshuman, from your perspective, I'm curious if you could just elaborate a little bit more on the importance of inventory efficiency, especially as brands are focusing more specifically online, but dancing that delicate dance of having online, but needing to fulfill a little bit more creatively, possibly doing click and collect or several other markets or several other paths to the customer. So Anshuman, yeah, just your quick thoughts on that would be interesting.
Sure. Thanks, Eugene. This is Anshuman. I am from Incref, co-founder, and we work with brands and retailers to help optimize their inventory on both merchandising side as well as warehousing side. Just picking on what Mark was saying, right? Having big box warehousing, is that the right way, or should we have lots of smaller pop-up warehousing, small dark stores kind of model? So interestingly, when I was last time in Europe and UK, I visited multiple warehouses, and one of the challenge which I saw was as e-commerce was growing in UK and Europe, brands were still managing e-commerce operations physically, like a segmented operations. So the B2B traditional business was running in a separate warehouse setup. E-commerce was running in a separate warehouse setup. And essentially what was happening is if you have, let's say, 100K inventory, you are splitting that inventory across 2 warehouses and not efficiently exposing that inventory to every sales channels and fulfilling where the demand is coming. That to me is the fundamental reason why the inventory is not efficient. In India, what we did with large international brands like Puma is basically allowed them to expose their 100% inventory to all sales channels, be it their B2B business, the traditional B2B commerce business, or their own brand.coms or marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, and others. Now, to do that, Eugene, there are a couple of things which are very, very critical, right? Your traditional legacy warehousing softwares, like let's say JDA, Manhattan, and so on, they're not designed to handle e-commerce operations efficiently. They are good for bulk operations, but they're not designed for piece operations efficiently. And hence you are basically keeping 2 separate sets of inventory, 2 separate sets of operations, right? What we did with Puma was merge these 2, brought everything on a single platform, made the e-commerce fulfillment super efficient from 3 to 4 days of fulfillment to single day fulfillment within 6 months. And then now we are doing 2 or 3 hours fulfillment, right? So that's the journey we traveled over a year, from a 3-4 days fulfillment to almost 6 hours, 4 hours fulfillment, right? One thing which we deployed, and this is interesting, we did this in UK with one of the largest 3PLs in UK. We deployed our software across 3 of their warehouses. And the beauty was, if you see traditional warehousing software, they take months or years to deploy. We did this in a couple of weeks, trained their employees in a single day, and they were efficiently running it after the second day. So that, I think that's the direction where the technology has to go to support the changing shift in e-commerce or commerce, right? It has to be fast, easy to use, and it should allow you to expose 100% inventory without making it inefficient.
Great. Thanks so much. That's a really interesting response. And I think it does, connect back to a point that Paul was making earlier about, a shift away from, focusing capital expenditure on investing in stores to focusing more on technology and supply chain. So I think that's really interesting. So thanks so much for the response on that. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next section of the conversation today, which will be discussing, the post-Brexit impact on retail. And so I'd like to invite William Bain, a policy advisor at the British Retail Consortium, to share some thoughts on post-Brexit impact on retail.
Thank you very much indeed, Eugene. As Eugene said, I'm the BRC's policy advisor on all matters trade and Brexit. Have been at the BRC for 4 years. So having been through the process from the beginning of the triggering of Article 50 into seeing its effects of the eventual deals, both the withdrawal agreement and the trade and cooperation agreement, in terms of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Great Britain and the European Union, I think there are some observations we can make about how it's impacting retail. Firstly, this is the biggest imposition of red tape and new regulation at one time that the industry has seen in the last 50 years. We have become used to, particularly in the food side, to just-in-time cross-border supply chains, which have allowed for products to be shipped across the Channel, shipped across the Irish Sea in a matter of hours without requiring any paperwork, any red tape, and that has supported a great expansion in the level of choice, the quality of goods, and ultimately keeping prices low, which consumers have enjoyed. And that helps very much in what is a low margin industry, as was described earlier. So really all of those are put at much greater doubt and risk by the choices that were made of the kind of Brexit deals that were adopted. And of course, let's talk about those 2 Brexit deals. So firstly, in terms of Great Britain to Northern Ireland, of course, the key Brexit deal here is the withdrawal agreement. It is that which set out in the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland, the new trading arrangements for products moving across from GB to NI. And what we've seen is an enormous expansion in the compliance time and person power that has had to be devoted by both individual businesses and the BRC and the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium as the representing trade body. Effectively, we've been involved in another set of negotiations, even although there is a deal which has been in place here. And so as we've discovered that what was set out in the protocol needs substantial further policy making in order to make it work for the reality of supply chains going from GB to NI. Products being put into lorries in Scotland or in Liverpool and sent across the Irish Sea by ferry within 4 hours. And so you look at some of the requirements on things like pre-notification for products of animal origin, requiring 24 hours notice. Well, retailers which have operated on a GB and island of Ireland basis collectively, I've just found that incredibly difficult to deal with. And so we have had some issues at some times with shortages of certain products. Now, retailers have been inventive, as you would expect them to be. They've looked at sourcing a bit more from Northern Ireland, sourcing a bit more from the Republic to make sure there are as few gaps on shelves as possible. But over time, we are going to see problems in terms of availability when consumers want the goods, choice and price. And remember, Northern Ireland consumers have about half the spending power of consumers in GB because of the differentials in terms of wage levels. So there's been a considerable task in trying to come to terms with the new regulations, making them work, the amount of hours being devoted into this. And of course, we're now effectively in a new negotiation process now, where the UK government and the European Commission will have to look at, in terms of food, around 18 different categories of controls and regulatory processes to be gone through affecting around 270 different products or processes. It's a huge exercise. And on top of this, you have the introduction of major new online infrastructure, such as the TSS, the Trader Support Scheme. You also have a movement assistance scheme, which is there to help companies which would not qualify for some of the easements that were agreed bilaterally and then have been supplemented by unilateral action by the UK in terms of GB to NI goods movements. So it is, there really one could set up a vast industry in terms of compliance with these new rules alone. And this is really something that we see on a daily basis in terms of contact from members to ourselves about this. And I think no consideration of the impact of Brexit on retail could occur without a consideration of what's happening on the protocol. So we hope that in the coming months, we will see prompt decisions being made by the EU and by the UK jointly rather than unilateral actions. We hope that there will be intensified engagement with business in Northern Ireland, particularly retail. And we hope that some pragmatic solutions will be adopted that produce certainty, consistency, and keep costs as low as possible for retailers. And obviously the key impact there, to keep the costs low for consumers. We also have major issues in terms of e-commerce with the requirement, unless anything changes, on the 1st of October for individual customs declarations for each package or packet moving over from GB to NI. We also have issues around the establishment rule. So it is the case that companies who wish to send from the 1st of November packages or packets into Northern Ireland from GB need to have some form of business establishment in Northern Ireland or the EU. There's even more intense rules if you want to use the UK Trader Scheme, which means that your goods would be presumed to be not at risk of entering the EU single market. So this is causing enormous hassle for companies in this time. And really Brexit is not done, as some people would have you believe. It's a daily set of experiences and a daily set of policy responses that are needed to make these Brexit arrangements work. In terms of GB to EU, what we've seen is really, again, a considerable rise in red tape. We've seen, these were issues that I was talking about really 3 years ago when I first did a piece with The Observer in January of 2018 about the consequences of leaving the common VAT area and what that would mean. That's why the BRC advocated that the UK stayed within the common VAT area, really as the best outcome for e-commerce. And so what we're seeing are goods being rejected at the door by consumers within the EU because they have to pay very high import VAT bills. We're seeing retailers not knowing whether it will cost more to have the goods come back to Great Britain or simply dump them somewhere in the EU because of the complexity of the customs declarations and the import VAT involved. And really this is sort of down to a few things. One, we now have import VAT considerations involving 27 EU member states, different rates, some aspects are different in each member state. So that's caused enormous complexity and regulatory challenges for retailers trying to comply with it. Second, consumers are unsure about how much the goods will cost. Will they face some additional charges at the doorstep, levied at point of delivery or point of arrival? Now, things will get a little bit easier in July when the EU's one-stop shop for third country retailers comes in. And so at least the import VAT on the good can be dealt with at point of sale rather than point of arrival or point of delivery. But that doesn't deal with import VAT implications on the insurance of the goods, the transit of the goods, the National Postal Service handling charge when the goods arrive in the European Union, nor any additional customs fees. And of course, there is a customs declaration that has to go with this item as well. If you think about it, if you were buying, let's say, a fragrance or a perfume that might be costing 25 or 30 pounds, and you have a 40 pound customs declaration on top of that, that is more than the cost of the goods themselves. Of course, that's diminishing sales. And so what are companies doing to respond to this? Well, some are looking at some tie-ups with the fast parcel operators to try and develop some cross-industry solutions to this, looking at changes in Incoterms, looking at providing a delivery duty paid model to customers in the EU. Some are looking at more profound structural changes, which means moving the distribution hubs into the EU to therefore obviate the need to pay import VAT on every transaction coming over from Great Britain. So there are enormous regulatory but also structural responses which retailers are working their way through. I think it is clear to say that Brexit was never an event, it is a process. It is a process being faced by retailers on a daily basis. Some of it will require adjustment by companies and the industry collectively itself. Some of it requires further action from the UK government. And some of it may be the subject of that 5-yearly review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which is due to begin in 2026. Thanks, Eugene.
Thanks so much, William. That was really interesting, and I loved, kind of the way you phrased Brexit as it's not just an event; it's a process, right? It's not a light switch that just happened; it's a dimmer switch. There's constant, evolution and response that retailers need to keep in mind as we move forward. And I think
Eugene, just a question. I think your video's on. There you go.
Oh, no, there we go. Sorry about that. So I think leading into our next conversation with Paul Cooper from N. Brown, I think it is kind of interesting just considering, the significant impact that Brexit has had on retail and the impact of COVID on retail and the shift from, physical only to online. And so, Paul, it'd be great if you could share a little bit of your perspective on e-commerce's ability to adapt and to support the changes that retailers are needing to make to respond to these shifting market conditions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eugene. So, Paul Cooper, I've worked at N. Brown for 5 years. I joined, so my background is very much technology strategy. I joined 5 years ago to sort of head up the efforts around digital transformation. And then 2 years ago, I focused on more agile transformation. So obviously the digital piece, talking to customers, getting the customer understanding, but then really focusing internally in terms of operations. So I think we've probably got a good perspective of some of the events that's happened. N. Brown itself is an organisation that's been around for 160 years. It was started in Manchester by someone called James David Williams, JD Williams. And he was one of the first people to utilise Royal Mail's packet post product to ship fashion out to consumers. So I think innovation is something that's kind of at the heart of N. Brown, I think. However, if you look at the last, it's been around for a long time, the level of innovation that we've had to adapt to over the last 2 years has just been exponentially difficult and challenging. I think being a digital retailer, that has put us in very, very good stead, and also being a UK focused digital retailer has helped us kind of navigate and manage some of the impacts of both the pandemic and Brexit. We 5 years ago, really focused on, I'm going to picking up a lot of the points that the panelists have made really resonate on some of the things we've been doing. So within our digital transformation, we were a kind of a heavily catalog based sort of offline sales organization. We also had through region of 20 to 30 stores. And we took the decision to really take our brands and focus those brands on sort of key customer segments within the UK. And we also looked at ourselves at M Brown and just got very clear on what our purpose was. So we exist to make people look and feel amazing. And what that then means is, so the next level of detail down is, we're targeting customer segments and giving them, experiences that doesn't just end at the point of sale. It's making sure that that outcome is achieved when someone comes to one of our brands. They browse, they understand, they buy something that then makes them feel great, which means that we have to consider that product, where it is, and also necessarily that product doesn't necessarily finish as soon as we sold it. It goes out to the customer and potentially it could come back. If it comes back, that's it, a learning experience for us. Why did it come back? Why didn't it make that customer feel amazing? We want to understand that, so you have to encompass everything. But in terms of like some of the impacts, so last year the pandemic has meant that organisations have had to really adapt to customer behaviour. It's changed significantly. So, for example, we were, so 5 years ago we were sort of 70% online. Now we're in sort of the mid-90s. As part of that as well, customer behaviour has changed from sort of 30% mobile to about 80% mobile. And I think the reason why it's important, if you look at the consumer behaviour, so certainly last year or before last year, people would commute into the office and browse their mobile phone and look to buy stuff on that commute. So the traffic within the day, you would set up your marketing campaigns based on the traffic through the day. However, people don't commute anymore. Their behaviours different, the channel behaviour is different. So again, picking up on people, you need to be channel agnostic, but you really need to be aware of channels and the behaviour across channels. It really influences your business model and your how you market to customers. But one of the big impacts, obviously, of the pandemic was that seasonal change, and also the product set change. The products that people were interested in, they weren't going out. They weren't buying party dresses. They're buying homeware and loungewear and things like that. And if you look at the traditional companies would buy 10,000 party dresses with the party season to come in. If you were sat on that stock during the pandemic, then that's a lot of stock's a write-off, right? So rather than having deep, you try to go broad. Loungewear, underwear, all that kind of stuff that people are still buying, you go broad. Unfortunately, with then Brexit, when you go broad, you have to have more just-in-time inventory. So your supply chain is bringing things in. You have more stock on the water. You have more stock coming from Europe. You have more stock coming from Asia. Rather than in big drops, you're trying to optimize and bring things in. So obviously, when Brexit comes in, you're more susceptible to supply chain disruption, and your customer behaviour. I think Mark made a great point in that people expect stock now, or expect product now to be Amazon delivering within 2 hours, right? People expect things to be there. So if you've got a thin level of stock and people are looking to buy stuff, but it could take 5 days to come somewhere from Asia, you typically make that customer a promise to say, well, it'd be 5 to 6 days before you get your product. When the supply chains get disrupted, you're falling behind on your customer promise. And more agile retailers like Amazon are kind of capturing those sales and coming in and capitalizing on the market. So yeah, it really is quite sort of two challenging events that have sort of created a perfect storm for retailers, and being kind of agile has just meant that we've been able to ride it out a lot of the investments we've made before. So obviously we, as I mentioned, sort of having a store estate, we took the decision to close those stores and just focus on our brands and our customer experience, because we wanted to sort of broaden some of the product offering. If you're having stores, you're very limited to the amount of stock you can put in a store, and that experience. So we sort of broadened our product set. And as you say, we also took the decision to really get those brands right within the UK, and that's really helped sort of insulate us from some of the Brexit discussions. But ultimately, I think as Will pointed out, we've still been impacted. So we treat Northern Ireland as part of the UK. Right, we're just set up to do that. So we weren't set up to understand that we had orders going out. We had a big shipping container, lots of shipping containers on the way out to Northern Ireland over that period. Because we'd gone broad, someone had ordered a gift set, right, as part of it's Christmas time, that kind of stuff. People giving out gifts, but that gift set had a chocolate bar in it, which meant the whole container got stuck. Right, and we weren't set up to just, to say, oh well, by the way, £1 million worth of clothes and a chocolate bar. It's very hard to sort of go to that granular level of detail, and the level of red tape and bureaucracy that then came in to try and sort that out and get that on stock, I think was quite difficult to manage. And I think, as Will says, there's still more of that to come. I've just noted down that, having a declaration per packet, I'm going to give my head of supply chain a nudge on that one just to make sure he's aware that that's coming. But I think there's, as you say, there's elements of adaptability and change that you just need to be aware of, and that things will always change. And I think that's, I guess that's the key takeaway. I've been involved in big transformational projects, as I say, a digital transformation and an agile transformation, but I have a difficult relationship with the word transformation, because people seem to think that there's an end date, and there isn't. Transformation never stops, and you have to, companies that realize that, I think, are the ones that will adapt much more in the future, rather than the ones that think they can just do a big multi-million-pound year transformation and then done, I've transformed now, and everything will be rosy. But yeah, that's a quick whistle-stop tour of sort of impact and things from my brand, but happy to address any questions. So I guess back over to you, Eugene.
Great, thanks so much, Paul. I think it's really interesting how you talked a little bit about transformation and how it's not just a one and done; it's an ongoing thing. And I think it's kind of similar to the point that William made about Brexit. It's not an event; it's a process, and the same thing holds true for transformation. It's not just a one and done; it's an ongoing thing. And similar to building innovation capabilities, something that I'm focused on. It's not just a light switch you turn on. Fostering those is an ongoing process, and so it's really important to kind of think not just about a specific due date. It's more of a longer timeline. And you also mentioned a little bit about the importance of making sure that inventory is available online. And we're going to post a question for everyone to answer, a survey question around whether or not you or your company are exposing your inventory online. So if you could take a moment to answer that question, the general audience, that'd be great. And we'll make sure that those answers are, the responses are available, so you can see what the consensus was from the rest of the attendees. And I think something else that was interesting in your talk, Paul, was the importance not only of inventory online, but the challenges then of supply chain disruption and how that can impact the ability for your inventory to be made available online. And so it's a kind of a nice transition into our third topic of conversation this morning, which is inventory management and some case studies on that. I think it's inventory management. I think it's always been an interesting topic, but it especially was an interesting topic, right after COVID. But it's still a hot topic, as we look at crossing borders, import export due to Brexit. And so I'd like to welcome Lynn and Penny from Jules to share a little bit about their experience and perspectives on inventory management and considerations that need to take place as you switch focus between not just channels, but also between territories as well. So Lynn and Penny, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. So we'll do some quick intros first. Thanks, Eugene. So I'm Lynn. So I work for Jules, looking after retail and people. So that means I'm accountable for the stores and shows, channels, and our HR team as well. Penny, I'll let you intro yourself.
Hi, thanks, Lynn. I'm Penny. I'm the commercial and wholesale director for Jules. So I look after all of the buying, merchandising, technical sourcing teams, as well as wholesale and partnerships and licensing.
Just a small amount. So we thought today we do three things: give a quick intro to Jules and who we are, what we do, really share our experiences navigating the last 12 months, linked very much to what some of the other speakers have talked about. And then I think link back to some of the things we've talked about already this morning in terms of our perspective on how we set ourselves up and the role of digital in that. So just briefly on Jules, so we're a lifestyle brand, and it's really important that we focus on the fact we're a brand and not necessarily a retailer in its own right. We didn't start off as a bricks and mortar retailer, and I think that's helped us along the way. So the business started at country shows, developed into wholesale, and actually physical retail came later. Today we operate across a number of channels. So we still operate wholesale, which is a really big area of our business, from independent stockists through to larger brands, partnerships with the likes of Next Online, John Lewis, we've mentioned already, or someone has for us, Marks and Spencer's, which is great news for us this week. But we also operate a licensing partnership, as Penny's alluded to, across a number of categories. We do have physical retail, located in places where we think that makes sense and in formats that make sense. And most recently we've gone into Centre Parks as an example of that. We have our e-com channel, direct to customer. We have a marketplace platform of our own called Friends of Jules, which is a beautifully curated bunch of sellers that resonate with our Jules customers. We recently acquired Garden Trading, which is another part of our group now, to really help us to stretch our categories and connect with our customers even more. We operate across, we've still got shows, I should mention that as well. So we still run shows, equestrian events, country shows and the like. And we operate across a number of territories. You know, some of those key ones being the USA, France, Germany. So to give you a bit of context, you know, the business has been multi-channel for a long time. We are genuinely channel agnostic, but we absolutely recognise that continued focus on digital and actually how particularly our physical retail channel acts as an enabler to driving customers to our online channel and creating more significant lifetime value. So in stores for us, it's about brand awareness, attracting new customers, helping our people to really connect with our brand in that physical sense, but very much encouraging them then to move online or into any other channels, because we really don't care where they shop our brand as long as we're delivering for them. So that's a bit of context on Jules, and I've probably forgotten a few things that Penny might want to add, but it's probably useful for Penny to start to talk about some of the ways we've navigated the last 12 months and pick up on some of those conversations about inventory management and how you operate across channels.
Thanks, Lynn. I think with that intro, you can guess that we've been really quite busy over the last 12 months, particularly with some of those new acquisitions and partnerships. And I think, look, linking back into what's already been said, I think obviously it's been very challenging the last 12 months, but the trend has really come towards us as a brand. And I think particularly linked into our multi-channel approach, we've been able to really leverage online and not just our own platform, but also our partnerships. So partnerships with Next and yesterday we launched on M&S as just two examples. And I think that's really allowed us to leverage the strength of brand even more than perhaps we would have done a couple of years ago, actually. And I think twinned with that and that demand for brand and casual, it's allowed us to really focus in on what's important for us and our customer from a product assortment perspective. think it's very easy for brands, retailers to get swayed by trends, etc. But actually for us, we've been able to really connect back to customer and connect back to the heart of brand. And of course, with everybody being at home and therefore wanting comfort, a casual brand specializing across all the family, that's worked really well for us. But also, it's allowed us to really focus on some of our areas such as outdoor and consider how we accelerate on some of our outdoor areas even faster than we might do. And I suppose linking into the garden trading acquisition, Lynn, also then focusing in on, well, how do we maximize what we know is high demand for jewels in the home from nightwear and lounge to furniture with our partnership with DFS that's gone from strength to strength. So I think we're really excited about what we can leverage as we look forward from a homeware perspective. So I think category and assortment wise, we're learning all the time. And you know, we've just been very lucky to be in the space that where the demand has been. Of course, we've had our challenges from an inventory perspective. So with shops being closed for so much of the time, that's been a real challenge for us in terms of how we've navigated that. And we've learnt lessons along the way in terms of getting the right blend of moving stock around versus actually keeping quite firm on believing that it will still be right when stores reopen. And we've seen our assortment work really hard as we opened again in most of our stores last Monday. So that's been great. I think for us, I think, you know, what we've really had to consider, it's not been just through pandemic, but prior, is how we get more agility from a stock availability and inventory management point of view. So by that, I mean how we really challenge ourselves and our partnerships in terms of where we might be housing stock to create best agility, so that we're looking at how do we diminish the amount of stock we're having to pull back or recall from partnerships where you might have a commission model as an example. So that's absolutely something we're focused on for future. And I think order in store and click and collect works really well for us. So I suppose we're trying to break down any barriers from what's in store versus what's online, as Lynn says, to really help connect customer. But I think, you know, there's ever more to do in that space for sure from an inventory perspective. I think one of the benefits that we have as a brand is we're not about fast fashion. And of course we might nod to fashion, but we're about delivering product that suits our customers' lifestyle. And so with that, we've been able to really reflect on how we navigate continuity ranges so that we're not always creating new for the sake of it. And I think that's really important when we connect back to our sustainability strategy as well. So we're really connected to how do we develop in a responsible manner. And that is then helpful from a stock management perspective if you're not constantly changing ranges and introducing new lines. And that works really nicely for some of our other partners like Amazon as well. And if we think about online reviews and the way that customers want to shop and gain trust on products, that's really important. I guess touching on what you were talking about, William, in terms of Brexit, and Lynn referenced, you know, we've got both e-commerce and wholesale business in the EU, and that's proven really challenging in terms of how we've been able to navigate that. And I think, you know, we're coming out the other side of it, but the cost of doing business is really challenging, and we're really having to get under the skin of that. And I suppose with all of the opportunities that we have as a brand, really challenge ourselves on where we need to put our efforts as well. So yeah, that's a key area of focus, and that really resonated on what you had to say, William. And yeah, I mean, I guess what we've been trying to work on as a group really is the notion of how we create better agility through shared stocks. And I suppose how we break down barriers from an assortment perspective in terms of making sure the assortment is live and visible to a store customer as well as an e-com customer. So I think we've probably still got a lot more to go there. And I suppose as we evolve and consider how we might evolve our homeware ranges as an example, how we create the right space to allow our customers to really connect with everything that we do as a brand, I think is a really exciting space for us. And of course, how we connect back into our Friends of Jewels sellers as well on our e-com platform. So yeah, lots that we're going at, and I'll hand back to you, Lynn, to add from a store perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. I think it's useful for me to steal the 4 points that Paul used earlier around the business model and partnerships, cost of doing business, the reputation and the customer when I think about stores, and overlay what Penny's just said about inventory management as well. So, you know, I've talked already about our overall business model, and stores is so key. Stores as a channel is so key in there, not because we necessarily want to drive millions and millions of pounds of sales from every store, but because we still believe it's a really important experience for our customers. But part of that is presenting our products in a really credible way. So we have to strike this balance between making sure we have that agility with stock, as Penny mentioned, and getting it to the right channels where it will sell, but having something that hangs together really credibly in capsules and for the season in store. And therefore what we do is work really closely with the other channels around how can we support moving stock to digital when we know it's not necessarily selling quickly in stores. How can we get it back? How can we do that locally? And coming back to knowing our customer, you know, our coastal stores are really different to our market town stores, for example. And so our ranging and our replenishment is really important. But what we can't do and we don't do is wrap our arms around our store stock and never let it go, because it's got to all work together. But it has to look credible, because otherwise, from a reputation and a brand perspective, that's damaging. Costs, you know, it's always easy to look at stores and say they're a really costly part of retail. I think you just got to have a different perspective on why you're investing money in bricks and mortar and the wage costs that Paul talked about earlier as well. And we have a really strong belief that we'll get that value when customers transition to other channels, particularly online, and stores are the beginning of the journey. And in some ways it's marketing spend, because you're attracting customers, engaging them, gathering data, which we do, our store teams do brilliantly. That means we can then create that lifetime value. Reputationally, again, stores are often where our customers have their first experience of jewels and fall in love with our brand. And so we've got to make sure that there's that golden thread that runs through all of our stores, our online experience, through our wholesale partnerships as well, that helps people to really connect with the brand. And finally, the 4th point that Paul raised from a customer point of view, if I look at it from a store perspective and again a stock perspective, knowing our customers, really understanding that data and putting our best foot forward for them is so critical to us. So we will not have a store in every town. We will not stock everything in every store. We'll be really discerning about what we put where, and we'll make sure that it works and we're sweating our assets. And if we're not, we'll review that again. But I think in summary for us, we're in a really fortunate position, as Penny said, that we're in the right space from a casual point of view. We're not fast fashion, we're not evening wear, but we've also got a really strong brand that really resonates with people when they're doing the things they love outdoors with their families in their downtime. And we do that across multiple channels, so we can, you know, play tunes on those channels, which is really challenging for Penny's team to get the right stock in the right places, but we feel it's a great benefit. And just picking up on one of the questions that someone asked in the chat, do we expect online to drop back down when stores are open? Yes, we do a bit, but actually we see online maintaining that huge proportion of our business that it has done, and that growth in the pandemic won't drop, we don't believe, to previous levels. So I just thought I'd pick up on that one as well. So Eugene, I think that's all from us.
Great, thanks so much, Lynn. And Penny, it was really great to hear. Actually, I was just, when you were going through all the various elements of the Jewels business model, it was just really fascinating to hear truly how multifaceted it was. And it really kind of shows Jewels as a fantastic case study in Paul's point at the very beginning of the conversation today about the importance of, you know, shifting and pivoting business models and considering yourself, considering the retailer as a bit of a platform, which I think is really, really fantastic. So thanks so much. And it was also kind of interesting hearing about, because of the diversity of your model and your channels to customers, the challenges that exist for having efficient and effective stock management, especially when you consider some things like shared stock. And so it'll be great to hear from Anshuman next, a little bit about how technology can help with the complexity that retailers are facing with these, kind of new approaches to selling to customers, and then the resulting back office implications on inventory management. So, Anshuman, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Eugene. So it was amazing to hear so many different perspectives, and I just picked on some of them and kind of connected to how I believe technology can help. So some of the threads which we heard was that with growing e-commerce and growing number of sales channels, the complexity of deciding how do we expose what inventory to various sales channels, to various stores, and how do we solve it dynamically so that I expose my right inventory at right point to the right customers. And there, Eugene, the way technology typically can help and how we are doing it is we capture granular sales data for every sales channel, for every store. And then the technology platform can basically analyze that data. And for every store, every channel can create a sales DNA, a demand DNA. That, okay, for my stores which are near shores, what kind of demand pattern I am seeing? What kind of product categories are selling? How many options or styles do I need to expose? How many pieces do I need to expose? What kind of size ratios do I need to expose? So we are building a merchandising platform which basically helps brands and retailers efficiently analyze that data at a very, very fast pace and then expose inventory to the right channels, okay? The other thing which we constantly heard across panelists was that with the growing need for e-commerce and the growing need for instant gratification which customers are looking, you need to be closer to customers. You need to deliver faster. Now there, what we did, and I'll just quote from some of our case studies or examples. So for example, in India with Puma, we helped them move from one warehouse to multiple warehouses. We mapped the demand at pin code level and then mapped it back to warehousing and intelligently allowed them to split inventory so that they're closer to customer. They can do faster deliveries at much, much lower cost. On the warehousing side, somebody asked in the panel that how do I remove buffer inventory? Now, the only way to do it is to ensure that we have practically live inventory sync with all my sales channels. If I have, let's say, a near real-time sync, then I can expose even one piece of inventory in my warehouse to multiple sales channels without the risk of getting excess orders, without risk of unfulfilled orders. So that's what we did for Puma. In India today, Puma is live across multiple sales channels. And even during peak sale days, for example, like Black Friday and all, they expose even one piece of inventory without buffer to every sales channels and fulfill that. And over last 1 year, they have been fulfilling more than 99.9% of their orders within SLA accurately. So that's the power of technology, the right kind of backend technology, the right kind of planning technology. Typically the gap, Eugene, I see is that most of the legacy softwares are designed for bulk in and bulk out. They're not designed for the dynamic environment we today live in, right? How do I decide, let's say for example, just giving you one example, right? How do I decide to prioritize my orders which needs to be delivered within 2 hours? Do I have a technology which can enable me on that, right? So those are the things which can help in optimizing my inventory in terms of what do I need, optimizing my inventory in terms of exposing it to the right warehouse, to the right store, and fulfilling it faster. Okay.
Thanks. That was really interesting, and I think that you kind of touched on what seemed to be two key points that have emerged through all of the conversations that we've had this morning. There's a focus on fundamentals, so the back office technology and processes that you need to run a retail business, but also the importance of adaptability, and so the ability to change and evolve, due to the shifting conditions in the market. And that was definitely, those were definitely two key themes that were across all the talks. So just a quick recap of the speakers that we've had this morning, starting off with Paul Martin from KPMG, talking about the evolution from retail, so retail coming obsolete to consumer commerce, talking to Mark about from Kingfisher about how stores can act as mini warehouses, but also the importance of some underlying fundamentals like search engine optimization, right? We also heard from Will Bailey from the British Retail Consortium about some of the unique impacts of Brexit to the retail vertical. Paul Cooper from N. Brown about acceleration and innovation and the importance of e-com platforms being able to platforms being able to support shifting business models. And then Lynn and Penny from Jules, and finally Anshuman, your talk. So I think there's definitely been a lot of different topics that we've discussed today, but those two key takeaways on adaptability and fundamentals I think are really interesting. And so that's kind of wrapping up the conversation today. We do have one more quick poll that we'll post to ask everyone about the percentage of orders that might be fulfilled within your service level agreements at your company, just kind of the result of having inventory in the right place at the right time. So it'd be great if you could just take a moment to respond, and you'll be able to see the collective results as well. I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking the time to join the conversation today. So thanks again. It was really great to hear from you. And with that, I will turn things over to Sandeep to wrap us up. Sandeep.
Let's start again. Thank you very much, Eugene, and thank you for doing a great job with moderating this event today as well. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you've picked up a lot. I think some marvelous insights were shared here today by such a diverse panel from lots of different sort of perspectives. If there's something you'd like to learn more about, if you'd like to reach out to one of the panelists, let us know and we can facilitate the relevant introductions. This session was recorded, so it will be available as a video recording to yourselves. There will also be a summary of the event done as well, so look out for that. But with that done, I think thank you again for the panelists for such a marvelous job and marvelous insights that you've shared with everyone, and look forward to working with you again. And yep, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.